Maya Sullivan had been sailing the Pacific Northwest waters for 15 months now, every weekend without fail. The rebuilt Eastman 42 fishing trawler beneath her responded like an old friend, steady, reliable, and utterly dependable in ways the sleek modern vessels could never match. She'd spent 3 years restoring this particular boat, hull registration number PT117, working late evenings in the boatyard after her day job at the naval engineering firm. The morning mist painted the Washington coastline in shades of silver and blue as Maya adjusted her heading slightly. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She wasn't supposed to be thinking about anything but navigation, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation she'd had with her grandfather the night before. "You know your grandmother never wanted you sailing that thing," her grandfather had said, voice tight with old worry. She said some vessels carried too much history. Maya had laughed it off, but sitting at the helm now, surrounded by the analog gauges and worn controls her grandmother had once touched, she understood what he'd meant. Every switch, every lever seemed to whisper stories she'd never heard her tell. The radio crackled to life, jolting her back to the present. "Unidentified vessel. You are entering restricted naval exercise waters. Change heading immediately." Maya blinked, checking her navigation chart. She was close to the boundary, but not inside it. At least she didn't think so. The coastal waters all looked the same from out here, endless waves and currents that could shift your perception without warning. "Civilian vessel Pacific Trader, registration PT to 117, she responded, voice steady. "I am correcting course now, and request permission to exit zone at heading 245. The pause that followed felt longer than it should have. When the voice came back, it was different, colder, more official. "Negative, Pacific Trader. You're in breach of restricted waters. Protocol. Hold current position. You will be escorted to perimeter. Comply immediately." Maya's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. She knew she hadn't crossed into restricted space, but arguing with Coast Guard rarely ended well for civilian boaters. 2 white shapes appeared in her peripheral vision, growing rapidly larger Coast Guard cutters, sleek and predatory, cutting through the morning mist like arrows seeking a target. The lead cutter captain's voice crackled through her radio, young and dismissive. "Ma'am, you piloting that rust bucket on purpose? This your first time in military waters, or just sightseeing?" His second-in-command chimed in with barely concealed laughter. "Somebody get a museum crew on standby. This relic's about to put barnacles on our grid." Maya didn't respond. There was no point. She'd heard it all before. Every joke about the trawler's ungainly appearance, every comment about sailing obsolete. Vessels, let them laugh. The Pacific Trader had been proving doubters wrong for decades. "Visual confirms it's an Eastman 42. The first officer continued, his tone shifting to routine professionalism. "Old frame, odd modifications. Looks like civilian restoration. Probably a custom rebuild. She's way off chart. Copy that. Treat as low-risk civilian incursion. We'll walk her to the fence." Maya watched one of the cutters position itself. Off her port side, its polished surface gleaming like jewelry against the misty sky. The contrast was almost comical. Her vessel bore sun-faded paint, careful lines of weld repairs, and hand-labeled panels that told the story of every restoration she'd made. But it held together. It always had. "Nice registration number, ma'am," came the voice again, slightly mocking. "Can't tell if it's original or just meant to look vintage. That a tribute boat or something?" Still, Maya said nothing. The silence seemed to unsettle them more than any defense would have. She adjusted her heading slightly, the Pacific Trader responding with its characteristic heavy grace, and continued following the escort pattern they'd imposed on her. What none of them knew, what Maya herself was only beginning to understand, was That the registration number stenciled in faded black above her port bow was about to change everything. PT to 117 wasn't just a random sequence of digits. It was a piece of history that had been sleeping for 70 years, waiting for the right moment to wake up. In the Coast Guard Command Center, a communications officer was frowning at his screen. A blue overlay had appeared where there should have been green, a signal he'd never seen before, transmitted through hardware authentication codes he didn't understand. The vessel's transponder was responding to something buried deep in the naval database, something that made the system flag the boat not as a threat, but as something else entirely. The officer called for his supervisor, pointing at the anomaly. Within minutes, the alert would work its way up the chain of command, reaching people who remembered what that registration number meant, people who had been waiting 70 years for it to return to the sea. But for now, Maya sailed on, bracketed by cutters whose crews had no idea they were escorting a legend back home. The silence on the radio stretched longer than it should have. Maya could feel the tension building in the formation around her. The Coast Guard cutters had tightened their positions, and she sensed a shift in their attitude even before anyone spoke. Below them, the sea had opened into the familiar shipping lanes where her grandmother used to practice evasive maneuvers. She recognized the waters from old photographs kept in a waterproof case, black and white images of coastlines and islands that looked like shadows across the deep. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Command confirmed registration on target vessel. Came the voice of the lead cutter captain, and something in his tone had changed. The casual mockery was gone, replaced by something Maya couldn't quite identify. Registration confirmed PT-117. Repeat, PT-117. The silence that followed was different from before. It felt heavy, loaded with significance Maya didn't understand. Then the captain's voice came back, cracked and uncertain. Control, I request immediate status hold on this vessel. Cancel all aggressive protocol. We are escorting a vessel tied to Operation Phantom. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had heard that name exactly once in her life, whispered by her grandmother, during a nightmare that had woken the whole house when Maya was 14. She'd never explained it, never spoken of it again, but the way she'd said it had burned itself into Maya's memory. Say again, leader, came the second cutter's confused response. It's Phantom, the first captain whispered, his voice barely audible over the radio. That's the registration. That's the boat. In the command center of the second cutter, an intelligence officer was frantically pulling up historical databases, his fingers trembling as he typed. When the results appeared on his screen, he went completely still. Jesus, he muttered. She's sailing it. It's really here. Maya's hands remained steady on the wheel, but her mind was racing. Operation Phantom. She'd never heard that term before, but something about it felt familiar, like a half-remembered song. The Pacific trader seemed to sense her confusion, responding to her inputs with the same patient reliability it always had. The first captain's voice returned, formal now, respectful in a way that made Maya's spine straighten. Command, do we have identity on the operator? Name coming through. Registered captain is Maya Sullivan. Civilian restoration authorization. No other log entries. Another pause then. Sullivan? As in Commander Elizabeth Sullivan? Maya's heart stopped. Her grandmother's name, spoken with the kind of reverence usually reserved for the legendary. But Elizabeth Sullivan hadn't been legendary. She had been a quiet woman who taught Maya how to fish, how to navigate by stars, and how to respect the sea. She died 3 years ago, leaving Maya the mysterious trawler with instructions to make it live again. Command, I need confirmation on relation, the captain pressed. Stand by. A longer pause filled with the sound of keyboards clicking and databases being searched. Confirmed. Maya Sullivan, granddaughter of retired Commander Elizabeth Sullivan, calcined Phantom Queen. The radio went completely silent. Maya could almost hear the collective intake of breath from the crews around her. Phantom Queen, another name she'd never heard, but one that seemed to carry weight she was only beginning to understand. The lead cutter captain's voice, when it finally returned, was barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, are you aware of what vessel you're piloting?" Maya found her voice, though it came out steadier than she felt. "It's my grandmother's fishing trawler. I restored it." "Your grandmother's?" The captain trailed off, then keyed his mic again. "Ma'am, that's not just any fishing trawler. That's the Phantom vessel. That's the boat that wrote the manual on covert insertion missions." In the Coast Guard Command Center, Captain Richard Brennan was reading a classified file he hadn't opened in 20 years. His hands shook slightly as he turned the pages, seeing again the mission reports, the operation logs, the impossible mathematics of what Commander Elizabeth Sullivan had accomplished in those waters 40 years ago. He had been a junior officer, then part of a signals team that had monitored communications during the Cold War. The coastline was too heavily patrolled, the enemy submarines too numerous, the surveillance technology too advanced. Every conventional insertion option had been ruled out as suicide. But Elizabeth Sullivan hadn't been sailing a conventional vessel, and she hadn't been thinking conventionally. She had taken her disguised torpedo boat into waters that destroyers couldn't navigate, moving at speeds that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size, threading between patrol zones with precision that defied every naval intelligence assessment ever written. 8 agents had been inserted that day, 8 critical intelligence assets, placed exactly where they needed to be, by one woman's refusal to accept that impossible meant impossible. The mission had been classified immediately, the story buried in files that most people would never see. But the vessel had become legend among those who knew. Operation Phantom, named for the boat's ability to appear as something it wasn't, had been written into the manual as the last resort option for covert insertions. The fishing trawler with registration PT-117 had become the vessel every intelligence officer measured themselves against, even though most of them would never know its real story. And now it was back, piloted by the granddaughter of the woman who had made it famous. Captain Brennan picked up his headset and keyed into the frequency. His voice, when he spoke, carried 40 years of respect and memory. "Captain of Vessel PT-117, this is Captain Richard Brennan, Coast Guard Commander. Confirmed name?" Maya's response came clear and steady. "This is Maya Sullivan, civilian captain. I'm the granddaughter of Elizabeth Sullivan." Brennan closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the sound of disguised engines cutting through foggy waters, remembering the moment he realized what true courage looked like. "You have full clearance, Maya. Proceed on any heading you wish. Welcome home." The escort formation had changed completely. Where there had been containment, there was now something approaching ceremony. The Coast Guard cutters flew wider, their positions respectful rather than controlling. And a third vessel had joined them, an older patrol boat, whose captain had listened to the radio chatter and chosen to participate in what was becoming less of an intercept and more of a homecoming. Maya sailed steady through it all, but inside the wheelhouse her world was reeling. The names being spoken over the radio Phantom, Phantom Queen, Operation Phantom, were pieces of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve her entire life without knowing it. Her grandmother had always been different from other grandmothers, quieter, more careful with her words, quick to deflect questions about her naval service. When Maya had asked about the fishing trawler in their boathouse, covered by a tarp and seemingly forgotten, she'd simply said it was a project for some day. When Maya had started the restoration work, her grandfather had helped without comment, his hands knowing every pipe and valve as if they'd never forgotten. But he'd never explained why his fingers sometimes trembled when he touched certain compartments. He'd never told her why her grandmother sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, muttering coordinates under her breath. And she'd never, ever spoken the words Phantom Queen in Maya's presence. Maya, Captain Brennan's voice again, cutting through her thoughts. I'm going to ask you to dock at our station. There are some people who would like to meet you, and some things you should probably know about that vessel. Maya hesitated. She had planned to sail her morning route and head home, maybe stop for lunch at the harbor cafe, spend the afternoon checking her fishing nets. A simple Saturday that was rapidly becoming anything but simple. Captain, I'm not sure I understand. What's happening here? I know you don't, Brennan replied, his voice gentle but firm. But that registration number means something. Your grandmother never told you about Operation Phantom, did she? No, sir. She never told me about any of it. There was a pause filled with the steady hum of the diesel engines and the whisper of waves against the hull. Then Brennan spoke again, and his voice carried the weight of old promises and older debts. She saved 8 lives, Maya, along with critical intelligence that prevented a confrontation that could have escalated to war. We were in the depths of Cold War tensions. Every insertion option had been ruled out as impossible. Your grandmother disguised that torpedo boat as a fishing trawler and sailed it right under the noses of Soviet patrol boats. Maya's hands tightened on the wheel. She thought about her grandmother's nightmares, her quiet intensity, the way she sometimes stared at the horizon as if she were seeing something Maya couldn't. The mission was classified, Brennan continued. Most of the details still are. But the technique she pioneered, using disguised vessels for covert insertions in hostile waters, it changed how we approach impossible missions. It saved dozens of lives over the years. We called it Operation Phantom, after her vessel's ability to hide in plain sight. That protocol is still active. It's still saving people. The Coast Guard cutter captain, who had first recognized the registration number, keyed his mic, his voice subdued. Ma'am, I studied Operation Phantom at the academy. I never thought I'd see the actual vessel. Most of us figured it was just a legend. It's not a legend, Maya said quietly. It's been sitting in my boathouse for 3 years while I rebuilt the engines. She thought about all those nights working on the boat, her grandfather beside her in comfortable silence, his hands sure and quick on components she was still learning. She thought about the time she'd caught him staring at the registration number PT-2117 as if it were a name he was trying not to remember. Why didn't she tell me? She asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Brennan's voice was soft when he answered, because she's a good woman who did an impossible thing. And good people don't usually talk about their impossible things. They just do them when they have to, then try to forget. The Coast Guard station was visible now, a collection of buildings and docks spread across the shoreline like a small fortress. Maya could see people gathering along the pier, not just regular personnel, but dozens of officers who had stopped what they were doing to watch the approach of a vessel most of them had never expected to see. Command, this is Sullivan, Maya said, using her full name for the first time in the context of her grandmother's legacy, requesting permission to dock. Granted, Sullivan. Pier 7 is clear. Priority approach authorized. As she began her approach, Maya caught sight of something that made her breath catch. There, along the edge of the dock, stood a small group of older officers. Even from this distance, she could see the way they held themselves, the posture of people who had been waiting for something and who had finally seen it return. The Pacific trader touched the dock with its characteristic solid bump, the fenders absorbing the impact with mechanical precision. As she secured the lines and powered down the engines, Maya could see more people gathering: officers, crew members, support staff, and others she couldn't identify. They weren't cheering or waving. They stood at respectful attention, some with their hands over their hearts, others simply watching in silence. When she finally shut down the engines and the familiar rumble wound down to silence, Maya sat for a moment in the sudden quiet. The registration number PT-117 was just paint and stencil, but somehow it had become a key that unlocked doors she'd never known existed. She stepped out onto the deck, then down to the dock. The coastal air was cool and salt-tinged, and in the distance she could hear the sound of other vessels coming and going, the routine business of a Coast Guard station going about its day. But here, on this particular patch of weathered wood, time seemed to have folded in on itself. The past and present were standing side by side, waiting to see what would happen next. Captain Brennan approached first, his uniform crisp, but his eyes soft with something that might have been memories. "Welcome to Port Angeles, Maya," he said. "I think it's time you learned the rest of your grandmother's story." The briefing room was smaller than Maya had expected, windowless and utilitarian, with fluorescent lights that hummed quietly overhead. But the people who filed in were anything but ordinary. Captain Brennan had assembled what he called the Phantom Generation, 6 naval intelligence officers who had been involved in operations made possible by Elizabeth Sullivan's innovations, all of whom were now senior officers stationed along the Pacific coast. They entered quietly, each taking a seat at the long conference table with the careful movements of people who had learned to respect moments of significance. Maya sat at the head of the table, feeling simultaneously honored and overwhelmed by the attention. "Before we begin," Captain Brennan said, settling into his chair, "I want you to understand that what we're about to discuss is still classified at the highest levels. The details of Operation Phantom are known to fewer than 40 people in the entire Coast Guard and Navy combined. Your presence here, sailing that vessel, changes some things, but not others." Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was agreeing to. The weight of the moment pressed down on her like the coastal fog outside, inescapable and transformative. Commander Sarah Chun, one of the younger officers present, leaned forward. "Ma'am, if I may ask, did your grandmother ever mention anything about her service? Any details at all?" "Nothing," Maya replied. "She barely talked about her naval career. I knew she'd served on patrol boats, obviously, but she made it sound like routine missions and standard deployments. Nothing special." A few of the officers exchanged glances. Captain Brennan pulled out a thick folder, classified markings visible along its edges. "Your grandmother was assigned to Coastal Patrol in 1975, he began. "Standard rotation, standard missions, until October 12, 1981. That's when everything changed." He opened the folder, revealing aerial photographs of coastline that looked like the edge of a knife, sharp, dangerous, and unforgiving. "We were conducting intelligence operations during a period of heightened Cold War tension," Brennan continued. "Soviet submarine activity had increased dramatically off our coasts. We had critical human intelligence assets that needed insertion at specific coastal points where Soviet monitoring was most intensive." Commander Chun spoke up. "Challenging is putting it mildly. We were trying to place people in locations that were under constant surveillance, with patrol boats running regular sweeps and electronic monitoring that could pick up any unusual vessel signatures. The traditional insertion methods were all compromised," added Captain James Reynolds, his voice rough with old memory. "Submarines were being tracked too closely. Aerial drops were too visible. Standard naval vessels were being monitored. We needed something completely unexpected." Brennan pulled out another photograph, this one showing what appeared to be a normal fishing fleet operating off the Washington coast. But as Maya looked closer, she could see that one of the images had been circled, a vessel that looked remarkably like the Pacific Trader. "Your grandmother volunteered for what the manual would have classified as a suicide mission," he said quietly. "Solo operation, no backup, no extraction plan if she was discovered. The mission required her to disguise a torpedo boat as a fishing trawler, sail directly through Soviet patrol zones, and deliver intelligence officers to 8 different coastal locations over the course of 3 days. Maya stared at the photograph, tracing the outline of the vessel with her eyes. She had sailed the Pacific Trader enough to understand what the mission would have required: navigation that demanded perfect timing, engine control that left no room for error, and the kind of steady nerves that couldn't be taught. She said yes anyway, Chun continued. Just looked at the patrol patterns, studied the Soviet schedules, and said she'd make it work. The mission took her 6 days, Brennan said. 6 days of sailing through waters that should have been impossible to navigate without detection. Using techniques that hadn't been tried before, improvising solutions to problems that had never been solved. He pulled out the final photograph: 8 people standing beside a fishing trawler on a misty dock, all of them looking exhausted but alive. At the center of the group stood a woman Maya barely recognized as her grandmother, younger, harder, with an expression of quiet intensity she had never seen on her face. She placed all 8 intelligence officers, Captain Reynolds said, his voice thick with emotion. Some of them at locations that required her to sail within 100 yards of Soviet patrol boats. The information they gathered helped prevent a potential confrontation that could have escalated dangerously. The insertion technique she pioneered that week became Operation Phantom, Brennan explained. Disguised vessels, civilian sailing, patterns, hidden compartments, and specialized communications equipment. It's been used successfully 23 times since then, placing over 60 intelligence assets exactly where they needed to be. Maya sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was learning. Her quiet grandmother, who taught sailing lessons and mapped fishing grounds and never spoke about her naval service, had literally rewritten the book on covert operations. Why was it classified? She asked. Because the techniques were too valuable to publicize, Brennan replied. And because your grandmother requested it. She didn't want the attention. She just wanted to make sure the knowledge was preserved so it could be used again if needed. The room fell silent for a moment, filled with the weight of heroism that had been kept secret for 40 years. Finally, Maya spoke. She's going to be so angry that you told me all this. Brennan smiled for the first time since the briefing began. Actually, Maya, we think she'd be proud. Because there's something else we need to discuss. Captain Brennan waited until the other officers had left the briefing room before pulling out a second folder. This one marked with current date stamps and urgent classification headers. Maya remained seated, still processing everything she'd learned about her grandmother's hidden heroism. Maya, I'm about to ask something of you that I have no right to ask. Brennan began, his voice taking on the weight of command authority, mixed with personal request. But circumstances have developed that make your presence here more than just coincidental. He opened the new folder, revealing satellite imagery of rugged coastline that looked disturbingly similar to the operation. Phantom photographs. But these were recent. The timestamp showed they'd been taken less than 24 hours ago. Yesterday morning, an environmental research team was compromised while collecting samples near the maritime border. Their vessel was disabled, and they've drifted into a highly sensitive area that's currently under heavy surveillance from foreign intelligence vessels. Maya leaned forward, studying the images. The situation was precarious, a small research boat stranded in open waters, with what appeared to be multiple larger vessels conducting exercises nearby. The research team includes 2 undercover intelligence officers who were monitoring unusual activity in the area. They're carrying data critical to national security, and we need to extract them without alerting the surveillance vessels that we know they're there. Brennan pulled out a tactical assessment chart covered in red marks and exclusion zones. We've run the scenario through our planning systems. Every conventional extraction option shows unacceptable risk levels. Naval vessels would be immediately identified. Helicopters would draw attention. And any unusual movement toward the stranded boat would alert the surveillance ships that were interested in that specific vessel. Maya felt her stomach tighten as she began to understand where this conversation was heading. The only viable extraction profile matches Operation Phantom parameters, Brennan continued. A disguised civilian vessel conducting what appears to be normal activity, with the capability to extract personnel and sensitive equipment without raising suspicion. The kind of mission that requires a vessel like the Pacific Trader and a captain who understands the specific techniques your grandmother pioneered. "You want me to run an extraction mission," Maya said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "I want to give you the choice," Brennan corrected. "We have other captains on base, some with extensive experience, but none of them are familiar with your grandmother's specific techniques, and none of them are sailing the vessel that wrote the original protocol." He pulled out another document: mission parameters, weather forecasts, surveillance analysis, and risk assessments. The scope of it was staggering, but the core problem was elegantly simple. 4 people were going to be compromised unless someone could do something that had only been done successfully a handful of times before. "The vessel is mission ready," Brennan continued. "We've had our best technicians go over it since you docked. Everything checks out perfectly. Your restoration work is actually superior to original military specifications in several key areas." Maya thought about her grandmother working beside her in spirit as she restored the Pacific Trader night after night, her grandfather's hands sure and patient as they rebuilt systems and recalibrated instruments. Had they known somehow that this moment might come? Had they been preparing the vessel and her for exactly this kind of situation? "What does my grandfather think about this?" she asked. Brennan smiled grimly. "We haven't told him yet. Protocol requires that we ask the captain first, then notify next of kin if the captain accepts the mission. And if I say no, then we try conventional approaches and hope for the best. No one would blame you, Maya. This isn't your responsibility. You're a civilian captain who restored a boat as a family project. You don't owe the Coast Guard or intelligence services anything." But even as Brennan spoke the words, they both knew that wasn't entirely true. The vessel beneath them carried more than just wood and metal. It carried a legacy of impossible missions and the memory of a woman who had said yes when everyone else said no. Maya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dock where the Pacific Trader was moored. Surrounded by modern Coast Guard cutters, it looked anachronistic, a relic from another era of maritime operations. But she knew now what it was really capable of. She knew what it had been built to do. "I need to know something," she said, turning back to Brennan. "If I do this, if I attempt this mission, am I doing it because I'm qualified, or because I'm Elizabeth Sullivan's granddaughter?" Brennan met her gaze directly. "Both," he said without hesitation. "You're qualified because you've spent 3 years learning every system on that vessel, because you've logged more hours on disguised torpedo boats than any civilian captain on record, and because you've been unconsciously trained by the woman who invented the techniques we need. You're chosen because you're her granddaughter and you're sailing her boat. And sometimes legacy matters more than protocol." Maya walked back to the table and picked up the mission folder, flipping through pages of technical data and satellite reconnaissance photos. 4 people were sitting in a stranded boat, waiting for help that might never come unless she was willing to attempt something that existed at the very edge of possibility. She thought about her grandmother's nightmares, the ones that had haunted her for decades. She thought about the weight she had carried silently, the heroism she had never spoken about, the techniques she had pioneered and then tried to forget. "When do we launch?" she asked. Brennan smiled, but his expression remained serious. "As soon as you're ready. Weather window is optimal for the next 12 hours. After that, forecasted patrol rotations make any extraction attempt significantly more dangerous." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of decision settle into her bones like sea salt. She was about to attempt something that only a handful of people in history had ever successfully completed, sailing a vessel that carried the memory of impossible missions, trying to prove that heroism could be inherited along with everything else. "I'm ready now," she said. "Let's go save some lives." The pre-dawn darkness over Port Angeles Coast Guard Station buzzed with controlled urgency. Maya sat in the Pacific Trader's wheelhouse, running through her pre-launch checklist with the methodical precision her grandmother had instilled in her during childhood sailing lessons. But this wasn't a lesson anymore. Somewhere in the disputed waters, 4 researchers were waiting for a rescue that might never come. Captain Brennan stood beside the vessel, headset in hand, coordinating the final mission parameters. "Latest satellite pass shows you've got maybe 10 hours before the surveillance vessels complete their current patrol pattern," he called up to Maya. "Current conditions are favorable, but visibility will decrease as you approach the target area." Maya nodded, her hands moving across the instrument panel with practiced efficiency. Every switch, every gauge, every control surface responded exactly as it should. The restoration had been perfect. The vessel was actually in better condition now than it had been during her grandmother's original Operation Phantom mission. "Intelligence. Team is standing by to receive the data package," Brennan continued. "We've got response vessels positioned at 3 possible extraction sites along your route. Aerial surveillance will monitor from maximum altitude, but they won't intervene unless absolutely necessary." But they both knew that if the mission failed, there wouldn't be much anyone could do to help. The waters were too heavily monitored, the margins too narrow. The radio crackled to life. "Sullivan, this is command. We have your grandfather on the line." Maya's heart skipped. She hadn't expected this, hadn't known they'd contacted him until the mission was already underway. "Put him through," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. There was a pause, then the familiar voice came through the speaker, calm and measured despite the circumstances. "Maya, hi sweetheart, hi Grandpa. I understand you know what's happening. I understand you're about to do something extraordinarily brave and dangerous." "Despite everything," her grandfather replied, his voice a mixture of pride and concern. "Despite everything," Maya smiled, "I learned from the best." "You learned boat restoration from me," Robert Sullivan replied. "Nobody taught you how to navigate through waters filled with surveillance vessels. That's something you figure out as you go. Any advice?" The pause stretched longer than usual. When her grandfather spoke again, his voice carried 40 years of memory and hard-won wisdom. "Trust the boat. Trust your instruments. But mostly, trust your instincts. When the situation gets complicated and the currents start playing games with you, don't overthink it. Just sail. The vessel knows what it's supposed to do. You just have to let it do it." "Grandpa? Yes? Were you scared?" "During Operation Phantom, when Grandma was out there." Another pause. "Terrified," he admitted. "Every second from departure to return. Fear keeps you vigilant in situations like this. Don't try to ignore it. Use it." The harbor master's voice cut in. "Sullivan, you are cleared for immediate departure. Winds are favorable. Visibility is good. Safe journey." Maya keyed her mic for the last time before launch. "Love you, Grandpa. Bring them home, sweetheart. And then bring yourself home." The Pacific Trader slipped from its moorings with barely a sound, its disguised engines running at minimal power as Maya navigated toward the harbor mouth. As the vessel passed the breakwater and entered open water, she felt the familiar push of the sea beneath her, but now with a purpose more profound than any fishing expedition. The journey to the target area would take approximately 4 hours. Time Maya spent running through mental rehearsals of the approach while monitoring weather conditions and fuel consumption. The satellite communication system kept her connected to command, providing real-time updates on the surveillance vessels, positions, and any changes in the stranded researcher situation. "Command, this is Sullivan," she called as she entered. "The initial operation zone. I am beginning standard fishing pattern Alpha, as discussed. Copy, Sullivan." Surveillance vessels are maintaining their current patrol grid. No indication they've detected anything unusual with the research vessel. Yet, Maya adjusted her course, deploying fishing gear that would make her vessel appear to be engaged in perfectly ordinary commercial activities. Her grandmother had pioneered this technique, hiding in plain sight, by doing exactly what people expected to see. She maintained radio silence for the next hour, her vessel following a zigzag pattern that slowly but deliberately moved closer to the target area. To any observer, she would appear to be a solitary fishing boat checking various locations for the day's catch. 2 hours into the mission, she spotted the first surveillance vessel, a sleek, gray ship flying a flag of convenience, but unmistakably engaged in intelligence gathering. Maya calmly turned her boat away, as any civilian would do when encountering a military vessel, and continued her fishing pattern in another direction. But this slight course change was calculated. It positioned her perfectly for the next phase of the approach, allowing her to drift naturally with the current toward the stranded research vessel while appearing to simply follow shoals of fish. "Sullivan, be advised," Command's voice came through her secure channel. "Second surveillance vessel has changed course. It's moving to investigate the research boat. Estimated time of intercept is 40 minutes. Maya checked her position. She was still approximately 2 nautical miles from the target, too far to reach them before the surveillance vessel if she maintained her current disguise. "Command, this is Sullivan. I need to shift to approach pattern Delta." There was a brief pause. "Sullivan, that will significantly increase your visibility profile." "Understood. But we're running out of time. The researchers need to be extracted before that vessel reaches them." Another pause, then. "Approved. Proceed with Delta. We'll monitor for any reaction." Maya moved to the specially modified control panel hidden beneath what appeared to be an ordinary depth finder. Her fingers danced across switches that her grandmother had installed decades ago, activating systems that transformed the vessel's performance capabilities. The Pacific Trader's engines deepened their tone slightly as additional power systems came online. To an observer, the fishing boat would still appear normal, but its speed had just increased by 15 knots without any visible change. She adjusted her course directly toward the research vessel, still maintaining the appearance of fishing activities, but moving with newfound urgency. 30 minutes later, she spotted her target, a small environmental research boat drifting slightly, its engines apparently disabled. 4 people stood on its deck, watching her approach with expressions that shifted from concern to hope as they recognized her vessel's Coast Guard identification markings, visible only from certain angles. Maya brought the Pacific Trader alongside the research boat with expert precision, deploying fenders to prevent damage as the vessels touched. "Environmental research vessel, this is extraction team," she called out, using the predetermined code phrase. "We're here to assist with your equipment malfunction." A woman on the research boat, clearly the team leader, nodded with understanding. "We appreciate the assistance. We have sensitive samples that need immediate transport." Within minutes, the 4 researchers had transferred to Maya's vessel, bringing with them several sealed containers that Maya knew contained both legitimate environmental samples and critical intelligence data. As per protocol, they sank their disabled vessel, making it appear as though it had suffered a catastrophic hull breach. "Command, this is Sullivan. Package secured. Beginning extraction route." "Copy that, Sullivan." "Be advised, surveillance. Vessel has changed course again. It's now heading directly for your position. Estimated intercept in 22 minutes. Maya checked her charts. They were still in highly monitored waters, with at least an hour of sailing before they could reach safer territory. "Everyone secure below," she instructed the research team. "There's a hidden compartment beneath the main cabin floor. It's going to be tight, but you'll all fit." As the team disappeared into the concealed space, another of her grandmother's innovations, Maya prepared for the most dangerous phase of the mission, evasion. She could see the surveillance vessel on the horizon now, growing larger by the minute. Its course was deliberate directly toward her position. Command, surveillance vessel is definitely intercepting. Request guidance. Sullivan, recommend you maintain fishing pattern and prepare for inspection. They may just be conducting routine checks. Maya knew better. The timing was too coincidental. Somehow, they detected something unusual, either with the research vessel sinking or with her own boat's approach. She made a split-second decision. Command, I'm implementing Phantom Protocol 3. Sullivan, that's not recommended. That's an untested. My grandmother designed it. I'm implementing it now. Maya activated another hidden system, this one causing the Pacific trader to emit a specific electromagnetic signature, one that would confuse most modern tracking systems by making the vessel appear to be in slightly different positions than its actual location. She then cut her engines completely, allowing the boat to drift with the current, while she quickly reconfigured the fishing gear to make it appear as though she'd been in this exact location for hours. The surveillance vessel approached to within half a mile, then slowed. Maya could see figures on its deck watching her through binoculars. She calmly continued to work with the fishing nets, playing the role of a solitary captain checking her day's catch. For 10 agonizing minutes, the surveillance vessel held position, observing. Then, surprisingly, it changed course and continued its patrol, apparently satisfied that she was exactly what she appeared to be, an ordinary fishing boat with nothing to hide. Command, surveillance vessel is moving away. Continuing with extraction. Copy that, Sullivan. Remarkable work. Maya waited until the surveillance vessel was well beyond visual range before restarting her engines and resuming course toward the extraction point. The Pacific trader responded beautifully, cutting through the waves with deceptive speed while maintaining its unassuming appearance. As the coastline came into view 3 hours later, Maya allowed herself the first deep breath she'd taken since departing. The mission, against considerable odds, had been successful. 4 researchers were safe, their critical data secure, and the Pacific trader had once again proven that appearances could be dangerously deceiving. Captain Brennan was waiting at the secure dock when Maya brought the vessel in. His face showed the strain of hours monitoring the operation, but his eyes conveyed unmistakable admiration. Sullivan, that was textbook execution, he said as she secured the lines. Better than textbook. That was innovation worthy of your grandmother. The research team emerged from below decks, stretching after hours in the cramped hiding space. They transferred their equipment to waiting Coast Guard personnel, who would ensure the intelligence data reached the proper authorities. The team leader, Dr. Samantha Reeves, approached Maya before departing. Thank you, she said simply, extending her hand. What you did today, I don't have words for it. Maya shook her hand, just doing what the boat was built for. As the researchers departed and the dock returned to its normal routine, Maya found herself alone with Captain Brennan and the Pacific trader, 3 generations of service, connected in a moment of quiet accomplishment. Your grandmother would be proud, Brennan said softly. She'd probably tell me my approach angle was sloppy, Maya replied with a small smile. Possibly. She was a perfectionist. But she'd recognize what you did out there today. Maya ran her hand along the weathered rail of the vessel that had carried so many secrets over the decades. What happens now? She asked. Now, Brennan said, we debrief, and then we need to talk about the future. The debriefing room at the Coast Guard Intelligence Center was considerably more sophisticated than the briefing room had been. Digital displays showed the mission track, satellite imagery, and real-time updates from ongoing analysis of the retrieved data. Maya sat at the head of the table, recounting each phase of the operation in methodical detail, from departure to approach, extraction to evasion, and finally the return journey. Senior intelligence officers listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly allowing her uninterrupted narrative. When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment. Admiral Jonathan Pierce, the highest-ranking officer present, leaned forward. "Miss Sullivan, I've overseen 57 covert extractions during my career. What you accomplished today ranks among the most impressive I've ever witnessed, particularly considering your civilian status and the fact that this was your first official operation." Maya nodded her acknowledgement but remained silent. "The electromagnetic signature modification you implemented, Phantom Protocol 3. You called it. That wasn't in our current operational guidelines," another officer noted. "My grandmother designed it, but never had the opportunity to deploy it operationally," Maya explained. "She documented it in her personal notebooks, which my grandfather gave me when I began restoring the vessel." Admiral Pierce exchanged glances with Captain Brennan. "Miss Sullivan, there's something we need to discuss," Pierce began. "The data your team retrieved today confirms what we've suspected for months. Foreign intelligence operations in our waters have increased by approximately 300% since last year. We're facing a level of maritime surveillance not seen since the height of the Cold War." He activated a display showing coastal patrol patterns that illuminated the scope of the problem: dozens of foreign vessels operating just outside territorial waters, monitoring everything from naval operations to commercial shipping. "Our conventional response capabilities are being stretched to the breaking point," Pierce continued, "and our covert insertion and extraction options are increasingly limited by advanced surveillance technology." Maya began to understand where this conversation was heading. "We need Operation Phantom," she said quietly. "Not just the operation," Brennan clarified. "We need the vessel, and we need you." Admiral Pierce nodded. "We're proposing the establishment of a specialized civilian auxiliary program officially for maritime research and environmental monitoring, but with a classified mandate for intelligence support operations. The Pacific Trader would be the prototype vessel, and you would be its captain." Maya looked around the table, studying the faces of career intelligence officers who had dedicated their lives to silent service. "You're asking me to follow in my grandmother's footsteps," she said. "We're asking you to create your own path," Admiral Pierce corrected. "Your grandmother designed the original protocols for a different era. Today's challenges require innovation beyond what even she envisioned. What you demonstrated today with Protocol 3 is exactly the kind of thinking we need." Maya thought about her life before today, the regular fishing expeditions, the quiet evenings working on boat engines, the simple rhythms of civilian existence. She thought about her grandmother's nightmares and her grandfather's silent support. What would the operational parameters be? She asked, her question itself an indication that she was considering their proposal. For the next hour, they outlined the program in detail: resources, support structures, operational limitations, and security protocols. The Pacific Trader would receive additional modifications, enhancing its capabilities while maintaining its unassuming appearance. Maya would have considerable operational autonomy, but would work within a command structure designed to provide both guidance and plausible deniability. When they finished, Admiral Pierce asked the question directly. "Ms. Sullivan, will you accept this position?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked a question of her own. Did my grandmother ever regret it? The double life, the secrets, the constant danger? Captain Brennan, who had known Elizabeth Sullivan better than anyone else in the room, answered. "She once told me that she never regretted the missions themselves, the lives saved, the crises averted. But she regretted not being able to share that part of herself with the people she loved most. It was a burden she carried alone for many years." Maya nodded, understanding flowing between them. "I'd like 24 hours to consider," she said finally. "And I'd like to discuss this with my grandfather, Not the operational details, but the fundamental choice. Of course, Admiral Pierce agreed. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 0900. As the officers filed out, Captain Brennan remained behind. For what it's worth, he said when they were alone, your grandmother never wanted this life for you. She wanted you to be free to choose your own path. And yet here we are, Maya replied softly. Here we are, Brennan agreed. But you're facing this choice with open eyes and full knowledge. That's something she never had. Maya drove to her grandfather's house that evening, the coastal road winding beneath a sky painted in twilight colors. The small cottage overlooked the same waters that had defined her family's history for generations, waters that now called her to service in ways she'd never anticipated. Robert Sullivan was waiting on the porch, his weathered face showing both concern and understanding as she pulled into the driveway. They've asked you to continue, he said as she approached. It wasn't a question. How did you know? He smiled slightly. Because I know Captain Brennan. And because I know what that boat can do in the right hands. They sat together on the porch swing, the rhythmic creaking matching the sound of waves against the shore below. For several minutes, neither spoke, content in the comfortable silence of family who understand each other without words. Finally, Maya turned to him. Did you know? All those years when Grandma was running missions, did you know what she was really doing? Robert sighed, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Not at first. She kept it from me, thinking it was safer that way. But eventually, I figured it out. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unexplained absences and midnight returns. Were you angry that she kept it from you? Not angry, worried, terrified, really. And sad that she felt she couldn't share that burden with me. He turned to face Maya directly. When I finally confronted her, do you know what she said? She said, I couldn't bear to see the fear in your eyes every time I left. She thought she was protecting me. Maya nodded, understanding flowing between generations. They want me to establish a new program. Operation Phantom for the modern era. And what do you want, Maya? The question hung between them, simple yet profound. I want to make a difference, she said after a long moment. I want to use what I've learned, what Grandma taught me, what the Pacific Trader can do. But I don't want secrets between us. Not like she had. Robert reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. Then we'll do this differently, he said. You'll go when you need to go. You'll do what needs to be done. And I'll be here when you return, ready to listen to as much or as little as you can share. No secrets about the fact that there are secrets, just understanding. Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of decision settling into certainty. Do you think she'd approve of me doing this? Robert chuckled softly. Your grandmother never wanted anyone's approval, including her own. She did what she believed was right, regardless of the cost. That's the legacy she left. You, not the boat, not the missions, but the courage to choose your own path. As the stars began to appear above the darkening water, grandfather and granddaughter sat together, bound by history yet facing forward into an uncertain future. The Pacific Trader waited in its secure berth, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And Maya Sullivan, unexpected heir to a legacy of quiet heroism, found herself at peace with the decision she would announce in the morning. When she returned to the Coast Guard Intelligence Center the next day, her answer was clear and unwavering. I accept the position, she told Admiral Pierce, with 2 conditions. Name them. First, my grandfather is to be brought into the program at the appropriate security level. He was supporting Operation Phantom before any of us knew it existed. He deserves to be part of this. Pierce nodded, agreed. And the second condition? Maya straightened, her posture reflecting the Maya determination in her voice. The Pacific Trader remains registered to me personally, not to the program. My grandmother built that vessel for freedom, the freedom to appear as one thing while being another. If we're going to honor her legacy, we need to maintain that fundamental principle. Admiral Pierce studied her for a moment, then smiled. Your grandmother would be proud, not just of your decision, but of the way you made it on your own terms. Over the following months, Maya Sullivan established what would become known within intelligence circles as the Phantom Fleet, a network of seemingly ordinary civilian vessels captained by carefully selected individuals, each vessel modified with hidden capabilities designed for specific mission profiles. The Pacific Trader remained the flagship of this unconventional armada, its weathered hull concealing systems that had evolved far beyond what Elizabeth Sullivan had originally designed, yet remaining true to her fundamental principle. The most effective disguise is one that doesn't appear to be a disguise at all. On a crisp autumn morning 6 months after her first mission, Maya stood on the deck of her vessel, watching as a young Coast Guard officer approached along the dock. Lieutenant Jessica Chun carried a tablet and the earnest expression of someone still adjusting to the hidden world of intelligence operations. "Captain Sullivan," she called as she came aboard. "The modifications you requested have been completed. The new communication system is fully operational and undetectable by current scanning technology." Maya nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Is there something else?" Chun hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Pierce asked me to inform you that we have a situation developing off the Alaskan coast. Potential extraction required within 48 hours. He said to tell you, it's a phantom scenario." For a moment, Maya felt the weight of her grandmother's legacy, the risks taken, the lives saved, the quiet sacrifices made far from public view. But unlike her grandmother, she would not bear this burden alone. "Please inform the Admiral that the Pacific Trader will be ready to depart at 0600 tomorrow," she replied. "And Lieutenant?" "Yes, Captain?" "Tell him we'll be taking the new protocol we discussed. It's time to see what this old boat can really do." As Lieutenant Chun departed, Maya ran her hand along the vessel's rail, feeling the connection between past and present, between the woman who had created Operation Phantom and the woman who would carry it into the future. Some legacies, she had learned, weren't meant to be forgotten. They were meant to be honored, expanded, and used to protect those who would never know they had been in danger. The Pacific Trader, with its hidden torpedo tubes and disguised capabilities, would continue to sail the thin line between appearance and reality, between what was seen and what was true. And Maya Sullivan, once mocked for her rust bucket fishing boat, would lead a new generation of phantom captains into waters where courage and deception sailed hand in hand, and where the most ordinary vessels often carried the most extraordinary secrets. "Miss Sullivan, there's something we need to discuss," Admiral Pierce began. "The data your team retrieved today confirms what we've suspected for months. Foreign intelligence operations in our waters have increased by approximately 300% since last year. We're facing a level of maritime surveillance not seen since the height of the Cold War." He activated a display showing coastal patrol patterns that illuminated the scope of the problem. Dozens of foreign vessels operating just outside territorial waters, monitoring everything from naval operations to commercial shipping. "Our conventional response capabilities are being stretched to the breaking point," Pierce continued. "And our covert insertion and extraction options are increasingly limited by advanced surveillance technology." Maya began to understand where this conversation was heading. "We need Operation Phantom," she said quietly. "Not just the operation," Brennan clarified. "We need the vessel, and we need you." Admiral Pierce nodded. "We're proposing the establishment of a specialized civilian auxiliary program officially for maritime research and environmental monitoring, but with a classified mandate for intelligence support operations. The Pacific Trader would be the prototype vessel, and you would be its captain." Maya looked around the table, studying the faces of career intelligence officers who had dedicated their lives to silent service. "You're asking me to follow in my grandmother's footsteps," she said. "We're asking you to create your own path," Admiral Pierce corrected. "Your grandmother designed the original protocols for a different era. Today's challenges require innovation beyond what even she envisioned. What you demonstrated today with Protocol 3 is exactly the kind of thinking we need." Maya thought about her life before today, the regular fishing expeditions, the quiet evenings working on boat engines, the simple rhythms of civilian existence. She thought about her grandmother's nightmares and her grandfather's silent support. What would the operational parameters be? She asked, her question itself an indication that she was considering their proposal. For the next hour, they outlined the program in detail: resources, support structures, operational limitations, and security protocols. The Pacific Trader would receive additional modifications, enhancing its capabilities while maintaining its unassuming appearance. Maya would have considerable operational autonomy, but would work within a command structure designed to provide both guidance and plausible deniability. When they finished, Admiral Pierce asked the question directly. "Miss Sullivan, will you accept this position?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked a question of her own. Did my grandmother ever regret it? The double life, the secrets, the constant danger. Captain Brennan, who had known Elizabeth Sullivan better than anyone else in the room, answered. "She once told me that she never regretted the missions themselves, the lives saved, the crises averted. But she regretted not being able to share that part of herself with the people she loved most. It was a burden she carried alone for many years." Maya nodded, understanding flowing between them. "I'd like 24 hours to consider," she said finally. "And I'd like to discuss this with my grandfather. Not the operational details, but the fundamental choice." "Of course, Admiral Pierce." "Agreed. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 0900. As the officers filed out, Captain Brennan remained behind. "For what it's worth," he said when they were alone, "your grandmother never wanted this life for you. She wanted you to be free to choose your own path. And yet here we are," Maya replied softly. "Here we are," Brennan agreed. "But you're facing this choice with open eyes and full knowledge. That's something she never had." Maya drove to her grandfather's house that evening, the coastal road winding beneath a sky painted in twilight colors. The small cottage overlooked the same waters that had defined her family's history for generations, waters that now called her to service in ways she'd never anticipated. Robert Sullivan was waiting on the porch, his weathered face showing both concern and understanding as she pulled into the driveway. "They've asked you to continue," he said as she approached. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" He smiled. "Slightly. Because I know Captain Brennan. And because I know what that boat can do in the right hands." They sat together on the porch swing, the rhythmic creaking matching the sound of waves against the shore below. For several minutes, neither spoke, content in the comfortable silence of family who understand each other without words. Finally, Maya turned to him. "Did you know? All those years when Grandma was running missions, did you know what she was really doing?" Robert sighed, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "Not at first. She kept it from me, thinking it was safer that way. But eventually, I figured it out. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unexplained absences and midnight returns." "Were you angry that she kept it from you?" "Not angry. Worried. Terrified, really. And sad that she felt she couldn't share that burden with me." He turned to face Maya directly. "When I finally confronted her, do you know what she said? She said, 'I couldn't bear to see the fear in your eyes every time I left.' She thought she was protecting me." Maya nodded, understanding flowing between. "Generations. They want me to establish a new program. Operation Phantom for the modern era." "And what do you want, Maya?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. "I want to make a difference," she said after a long moment. "I want to use what I've learned, what Grandma taught me, what the Pacific Trader can do, but I don't want secrets between us." Not like she had. Robert reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "Then we'll do this differently," he said. "You'll go when you need to go. You'll do what needs to be done. And I'll be here when you return, ready to listen to as much or as little as you can share. No secrets about the fact that there are secrets, just understanding." Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of decision settling into certainty. "Do you think she'd approve of me doing this?" Robert chuckled softly. "Your grandmother never wanted anyone's approval, including her own. She did what she believed was right, regardless of the cost. That's the legacy she left. You, not the boat, not the missions, but the courage to choose your own path." As the stars began to appear above the darkening water, grandfather and granddaughter sat together, bound by history yet facing forward into an uncertain future. The Pacific Trader waited in its secure berth, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And Maya Sullivan, unexpected heir to a legacy of quiet heroism, found herself at peace with the decision she would announce in the morning. When she returned to the Coast Guard Intelligence Center the next day, her answer was clear and unwavering. "I accept the position," she told Admiral Pierce, "with two conditions." "Name them." "First, my grandfather is to be brought into the program at the appropriate security level. He was supporting Operation Phantom before any of us knew it existed. He deserves to be part of this." Pierce nodded. "Agreed." "And the second condition?" Maya straightened, her posture reflecting the determination in her voice. "The Pacific Trader remains registered to me personally, not to the program. My grandmother built that vessel for freedom, the freedom to appear as one thing while being another. If we're going to honor her legacy, we need to maintain that fundamental principle." Admiral Pierce studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Your grandmother would be proud, not just of your decision, but of the way you made it on your own terms." Over the following months, Maya Sullivan established what would become known within intelligence circles as the Phantom Fleet, a network of seemingly ordinary civilian vessels captained by carefully selected individuals, each vessel modified with hidden capabilities designed for specific mission profiles. The Pacific Trader remained the flagship of this unconventional armada, its weathered hull concealing systems that had evolved far beyond what Elizabeth Sullivan had originally designed, yet remaining true to her fundamental principle. The most effective disguise is one that doesn't appear to be a disguise at all. On a crisp autumn morning 6 months after her first mission, Maya stood on the deck of her vessel, watching as a young Coast Guard officer approached along the dock. Lieutenant Jessica Chun carried a tablet and the earnest expression of someone still adjusting to the hidden world of intelligence operations. "Captain Sullivan," she called as she came aboard. "The modifications you requested have been completed. The new communication system is fully operational and undetectable by current scanning technology." Maya nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Is there something else?" Chun hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Pierce asked me to inform you that we have a situation developing off the Alaskan coast. Potential extraction required within 48 hours. He said to tell you, it's a phantom scenario." For a moment, Maya felt the weight of her grandmother's legacy, the risks taken, the lives saved, the quiet sacrifices made far from public view. But unlike her grandmother, she would not bear this burden alone. "Please inform the Admiral that the Pacific Trader will be ready to depart at 0600 tomorrow," she replied. "And Lieutenant?" "Yes, Captain?" "Tell him we'll be taking the new protocol we discussed. It's time to see what this old boat can really do." As Lieutenant Chun departed, Maya ran her hand along the vessel's rail, feeling the connection between past and present, Between the woman who had created Operation Phantom and the woman who would carry it into the future, some legacies she had learned weren't meant to be forgotten. They were meant to be honored, expanded, and used to protect those who would never know they had been in danger. The Pacific Trader, with its hidden torpedo tubes and disguised capabilities, would continue to sail the thin line between appearance and reality, between what was seen and what was true. And Maya Sullivan, once mocked for her rust bucket fishing boat, would lead a new generation of phantom captains into waters where courage and deception sailed hand in hand, and where the most ordinary vessels often carried the most extraordinary secrets. The mission to Alaska would prove to be Maya's greatest challenge yet. The target was a remote research station on a tiny island in the Bering Sea, where a team of climate scientists had accidentally uncovered something far more valuable than ice core samples, evidence of unauthorized submarine activity in protected waters. 3 days into their discovery, all communications from the station had abruptly ceased. Satellite imagery showed unusual vessel movements in the area, and intelligence analysts feared the worst. The scientists needed extraction immediately, but the station was under constant surveillance from what appeared to be a commercial fishing fleet that was anything but commercial. The morning of departure brought icy rain and gusting winds, perfect weather for a vessel that thrived on invisibility. Maya supervised the final loading of supplies, including specialized equipment concealed within what appeared to be ordinary fishing gear. Captain Brennan arrived as they were completing preparations, his expression grave. "Satellite pass from 30 minutes ago shows increased activity around the island," he reported. "They've established a perimeter approximately 3 nautical miles out. No vessel has been permitted to approach." "Any communication from the research team?" Maya asked. "Nothing direct, but we've detected emergency beacon patterns consistent with our distress protocols. They're alive, but they need immediate extraction." Maya nodded, studying the weather charts for the region. "The forecast works in our favor. Heavy storms moving in will reduce visibility and complicate their surveillance efforts." "It also complicates your approach," Brennan pointed out. "The Pacific Trader was built for bad weather," Maya replied with quiet confidence. "My grandmother always said storms were a phantom's best friend." Brennan handed her a sealed envelope, updated coordinates and authentication codes. "The research team will be expecting standard environmental protection protocols. You'll need to convince them otherwise." As Maya prepared to depart, a black SUV pulled up to the dock. The door opened to reveal her grandfather, carrying what appeared to be an ordinary tackle box. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing her the container. "It belonged to your grandmother. She called it her intuition insurance." Maya opened the box to find a collection of handcrafted navigation tools, analog devices designed to function without electronic signatures that could be detected or disrupted. "She never trusted digital systems completely," Robert explained. "These got her through the worst storm season of '85 when everything else failed." Maya embraced him tightly. "Thank you. Just remember what I told you," he said softly. "Trust the boat. Trust yourself." The journey to the Alaskan waters took 2 days of careful navigation. The Pacific Trader maintained its disguise as an independent fishing vessel, joining and leaving various commercial groups to avoid establishing a pattern. Maya kept in minimal contact with command, using the burst transmission protocols her grandmother had designed to reduce detection risk. As they approached the target region, the weather deteriorated exactly as predicted. Visibility dropped to less than a quarter mile, and the seas built to 15-foot swells that would have challenged vessels twice the size of the Pacific Trader. Maya welcomed the conditions. The surveillance vessels would be struggling to maintain their perimeter in this weather, creating gaps she could exploit. She activated the specialized sonar system, another of her own innovations that detected vessel movements without emitting traceable signals. The screen revealed what she had hoped for: The surveillance ships had clustered on the leeward side of the island, seeking shelter from the worst of the storm. Their formation had gaps, particularly on the windward approach where conditions were most severe. "Time to earn our reputation," Maya murmured to herself, adjusting course directly into the heart of the storm front. The Pacific trader pitched violently as it battled the towering waves, but its specialized stabilization systems, disguised as ordinary fishing equipment, kept it manageable. Maya navigated by instinct and experience, using her grandmother's analog tools to supplement the minimal electronic systems she allowed herself to operate. 4 hours of punishing navigation brought them within visual range of the island, a rocky outcrop, barely visible through the sheets of driving rain. The research station consisted of a cluster of prefabricated buildings perched precariously on the island's southern edge. Maya activated the secure communication system, transmitting the recognition code on the emergency frequency the scientists would be monitoring. "Research Station Bravo, this is Environmental Vessel Pacific Trader. We are approaching your position with extraction capability. Please acknowledge." The response came almost immediately, a voice tight with stress but maintaining professional. "Come, Pacific Trader, this is Station Bravo, we read you. Be advised we are under observation. Approach is not recommended. Station Bravo, we are aware of your situation. We are operating under Protocol Phantom. Please prepare for immediate evacuation. Essential equipment and data only." There was a pause then. "Pacific Trader, our observation indicates you are a single fishing vessel. We have 6 personnel and critical equipment. Confirmation requested on extraction capability." Maya smiled slightly. They were appropriately cautious. "Station Bravo, verification code Sierra Echo November. The Pacific Trader is more than it appears. Prepare for extraction in 30 minutes. Mark your position with standard environmental distress indicators." Another pause, then a different voiceholder. Clearly the team leader. "Pacific Trader, this is Dr. Harrison. Confirmation accepted. We'll be ready." Maya guided the vessel through the final approach, using the storm's intensity as cover. The surveillance ships remained on the other side of the island, their radar systems struggling to penetrate the weather front that now shielded her approach. As they reached the rocky shoreline, Maya activated the vessel's most closely guarded secret, a specialized landing system that allowed the Pacific Trader to approach shorelines too dangerous for conventional vessels. Stabilizers extended beneath the waterline, and reinforced hull sections deployed to protect against rocky impacts. The research team was waiting at the water's edge, huddled against the driving rain. They had followed instructions perfectly, disguising their equipment cases as environmental monitoring gear and wearing the standard yellow slickers of oceanic researchers. Maya deployed the rapid transfer system, a specially designed loading mechanism that appeared to be ordinary fishing equipment but could transfer personnel and cargo in record time. "Welcome aboard," she called over the howling wind. "Secure yourselves below immediately." The scientists needed no encouragement. They boarded efficiently, their faces showing equal measures of relief and amazement at the vessel's unexpected capabilities. Dr. Harrison, a gray-haired woman with the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in field research, approached Maya in the wheelhouse. "You're operating under Phantom Protocol," she said. It wasn't a question. "I never thought I'd see it activated in my lifetime." Maya gave her a questioning look. "I worked with your grandmother," Harrison explained, seeing her surprise. "Not directly, but I was part of the support team for several of her operations. In the 80s, the moment you transmitted that code, I knew exactly who had sent you." "We need to move quickly," Maya replied, already turning the vessel back toward open water. "What did you find that was important enough to trigger this level of response?" Harrison handed her a waterproof data drive. "Evidence of systematic intrusions into protected waters." submarine activity where none should exist, and something else: communications interception equipment installed on the seafloor. They've been monitoring naval traffic across the entire northern corridor. Maya secured the drive in a specialized compartment designed to protect sensitive data. How were you compromised? We weren't careful enough, Harrison admitted. Started asking too many questions with the wrong research vessels. 3 days ago, they stopped pretending to ignore us. Cut our communications, established the surveillance perimeter. We've been waiting for them to make a move on the station itself. The Pacific trader pushed back into open water, the storm still providing crucial cover for their escape. Maya plotted a course that would appear to any observer as a fishing vessel seeking shelter from the weather in a nearby cove, a natural action that would raise no suspicions. But once they reached the cove, she would implement the next phase of her plan, a bold strategy that had never been attempted before, even in her grandmother's era. Dr. Harrison, I need you and your team to prepare for unusual conditions, Maya instructed. We'll be employing a new protocol that requires specialized preparations. For the next hour, as they battled through the storm toward the sheltered cove, Maya and her small crew readied the vessel for Protocol Phantom Echo, her own innovation that would push the Pacific trader's capabilities to their limits. The surveillance vessels had begun to move, their pattern suggesting they had detected the research station's abandonment. It would be only a matter of hours before they expanded their search to include all vessels in the region. As they reached the cove, Maya activated the final phase of her plan. All personnel secure for underwater transit, she announced over the internal communication system. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened. Underwater transit? This vessel is submersible? Not entirely, Maya explained, but enough to disappear when we need to. She activated the specialized ballast systems concealed within what appeared to be ordinary fishing tanks. The Pacific trader settled lower in the water, until only its superstructure remained visible above the surface, profile that would register on radar as little more than wave action in a stormy sea. Your grandmother never had this capability, Harrison remarked, clearly impressed. My grandmother laid the groundwork, Maya replied. She always said the next generation of Phantom would need to evolve beyond what she could imagine. This is that evolution. For 6 hours, they maintained this semi-submerged state, drifting with carefully calculated currents that carried them past the expanding search perimeter. The vessel's specialized propulsion system nearly silent and producing minimal wake provided just enough directional control to maintain their course without detection. When they finally surfaced beyond the search area, Maya allowed herself the first deep breath she'd taken since departing. The research team emerged from below decks, their expressions a mixture of relief and amazement. I've been in naval operations for 30 years, Dr. Harrison said quietly, and I've never seen anything like what you just did. That's the point of Phantom, Maya replied with a small smile. If people saw it coming, it wouldn't work. The return journey took another day and a half of careful navigation. Maya maintained the Pacific trader's disguise as an ordinary fishing vessel, now laden with what appeared to be a successful catch. When they finally docked at the secure facility, Admiral Pierce was waiting with Captain Brennan and a team of intelligence analysts eager to receive the data the scientists had risked their lives to preserve. Dr. Harrison stopped before disembarking, turning to Maya with an expression of profound respect. Your grandmother saved my colleagues once years ago, she said. A different operation, a different sea, but the same courage. She would be extraordinarily proud of what you've accomplished. Here. As the scientists departed with their crucial data, Admiral Pierce approached Maya on the deck of the Pacific trader. The mission was a complete success, he said without preamble. The data they recovered will transform our understanding of unauthorized activities in protected waters. You've proven that Operation Phantom isn't just viable in the modern era, it's essential. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of accomplishment alongside the bone-deep fatigue of the mission. The semi-submersible capability was particularly impressive. Pierce continued. That wasn't in any of our operational plans. It was something my grandmother sketched but never implemented, Maya explained. I found the designs in her journals and adapted them to modern materials. We'd like to expand the capability across the Phantom fleet, Pierce said. With your permission, of course, since it's your innovation. Maya considered the request. On one condition, which is that we expand the program to include more than just intelligence operations. There are environmental researchers, climate scientists, and conservation teams working in contested waters who need the kind of protection and capability we can provide. My grandmother built this program to save lives and protect vital information. I want to honor that legacy in the broadest possible way. Admiral Pierce studied her for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. We'll establish appropriate protocols for humanitarian and scientific support operations. As he departed, Maya remained on the deck of the Pacific Trader, watching the activity around the dock as the data was secured and the scientists debriefed. Captain Brennan joined her, offering a steaming mug of coffee. "You look like you could use this," he said. "Thanks." She accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around its warmth. "Your grandfather is waiting at the main gate," Brennan mentioned. "I told security to let him through once the debriefing is complete." Maya nodded her appreciation. "The semi-submersible system needs refinement," she said after a moment. "The ballast control was sluggish in heavy seas. And we need better thermal insulation for the crew spaces," Brennan smiled. "Already thinking about the next mission?" "Always," she replied. "That's the legacy, isn't it? Never being satisfied with good enough when lives are at stake." "Your grandmother used to say something similar," Brennan recalled. "Good enough gets people killed. Better than anyone thought possible brings them home." Maya sipped her coffee, watching as the last of the scientific equipment was unloaded from her vessel. The Pacific Trader sat low in the water, bearing the marks of its difficult journey, salt-crusted windows, weather-beaten hull, the superficial damage that made it appear exactly what it was supposed to be, a working boat with stories to tell, most of which would never be told. "What's next for you?" Brennan asked. Maya's gaze drifted toward the open sea beyond the harbor, refinements to the vessel, training for the new captains joining the Phantom fleet, and then wherever the next impossible mission takes us. "Just like your grandmother," Brennan observed with a smile. Maya shook her head slightly. "Not just like her. Similar course, different navigator. She laid the foundation. I'm building something new on it." As the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the Pacific Trader in golden light, Maya Sullivan understood that the true legacy of Operation Phantom wasn't just the vessel or its capabilities. It was the courage to evolve, to adapt, to face each new challenge with innovation and determination. The Coast Guard officers who had once mocked her rust bucket fishing boat now stood at attention when she passed. The intelligence analysts, who had doubted a civilian's capabilities, now sought her counsel on operational planning. And somewhere, perhaps, her grandmother was watching with pride as her granddaughter transformed a legacy of secrecy into a future of possibility. Maya finished her coffee and set the mug aside, already making mental notes about the modifications she would implement before the next mission. The Pacific Trader's hidden torpedo tubes, remnants of its original military design, had long since been repurposed for specialized equipment deployment. But they remained symbolic of the vessel's dual nature, ordinary on the surface, extraordinary beneath. Just like the women who had captained it across generations. Just like the quiet heroes who did what needed to be done, without expectation of recognition or reward. Just like the legacy that would continue to save lives in waters where danger and opportunity flowed together like currents in a changing sea. 8 months after the Alaskan mission, Maya stood before a group of 12 recruits, the first official training class for the expanded Phantom Fleet program. They gathered in a converted warehouse at the secure facility, its windows frosted. To prevent observation from outside, the space was filled with navigational equipment, communication systems, and detailed models of the vessels they would eventually command. Operation Phantom isn't just about boats, Maya began, her voice carrying across the attentive group. It's about becoming invisible in plain sight. It's about understanding that the best disguise isn't one that draws attention to itself as a disguise. It's one that fits so perfectly into the expected environment that no one questions its presence. The recruits, a mixture of Coast Guard officers, naval personnel, and carefully selected civilians with specialized maritime experience, watched her with expressions ranging from fascination to skepticism. They had been chosen after months of rigorous evaluation, not just for their technical skills, but for their adaptive thinking and ability to maintain operational security. Each of you will train on vessels specifically designed for different mission profiles, Maya continued, moving to a display of ship models. Commercial fishing trawlers like the Pacific Trader, research vessels for environmental operations, supply boats for coastal support, tourist craft for populated areas, each with capabilities hidden beneath ordinary appearances. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed, a veteran of Naval Special Operations who had transferred to the program after 15 years of distinguished service, raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, we've all studied conventional disguise protocols in our previous training. How does Phantom differ from standard covert maritime operations?" Maya nodded, appreciating the direct question. "Conventional disguise focuses on not being identified as military," she explained. "Phantom goes further. It's about embodying the disguise so completely that even careful observation reveals exactly what we want observers to see. My grandmother called it method acting with ships. You don't just operate a fishing vessel. You become fishing vessel operators down to the smallest details." She gestured toward the back of the room, where Captain Brennan had quietly entered. "Captain Brennan has agreed to share something today that illustrates this principle perfectly. Something that's never been broadly disclosed, even within intelligence circles." Brennan stepped forward, carrying a worn leather case that he placed on the central table. In 1983, Elizabeth Sullivan, the founder of Operation Phantom, was conducting an extraction mission off the coast of Nicaragua, he began, his voice respectful as he opened the case. Her vessel was stopped for inspection by a patrol boat. A routine check, but one that could have compromised not just her mission, but the lives of the intelligence officer she was transporting. He removed a series of photographs, passing them to the recruits. "What you're seeing is Elizabeth's vessel being boarded and searched by foreign military personnel. For 45 minutes, they examined every compartment, every storage area, every piece of equipment on board." The recruits studied the images, their expressions growing increasingly impressed as they understood the implications. "The patrol officers didn't just search the obvious areas," Brennan continued. "They conducted a thorough inspection, including spaces where the hidden compartments were located. And they found absolutely nothing suspicious." Maya took up the narrative. "My grandmother didn't just disguise her vessel. She lived the disguise. The fishing equipment wasn't props, it was functional, used equipment with the wear patterns of actual use. The fish in her hold weren't decorative, they were caught using that equipment. Her hands had the calluses of a commercial fisher. Her documentation showed a history of legitimate fishing activity." She paused, letting the lesson sink in. "When they searched the hidden compartment where 3 intelligence officers were concealed, they found what appeared to be carefully packed personal belongings and supplies, exactly what a commercial fisher would store there. What they didn't realize was that the officers were hidden within those supplies, in specially designed containment systems that registered as ordinary items on their detection equipment. Lieutenant Commander Reed whistled softly. That's beyond disguise. That's transformation. Exactly, Maya affirmed. And that's what each of you will learn. Not just to operate your vessels, but to become one with your cover identities. So completely that even under direct scrutiny, you remain exactly what you appear to be. For the next 3 hours, Maya and Captain Brennan outlined the fundamental principles of the Phantom methodology, the technical systems, the psychological preparation, the operational protocols that had evolved from Elizabeth Sullivan's original concepts to the modern program they now led. As the session concluded, Maya noticed a young woman at the back of the group who had remained silent throughout the training. Ensign Sophia Reyes had the distinguished record of a promising Coast Guard officer, but her personnel file indicated a background that made her uniquely qualified for Phantom operations. She had grown up in a family of commercial fishers before joining the service. Ensign Reyes, Maya called as the group prepared to depart. A moment of your time. The young officer approached, her posture military perfect but her eyes curious. You've been quiet today, Maya observed. I'm interested in your perspective. Given your background. Reyes hesitated, then spoke with the careful consideration that characterized her record. Ma'am, what you're describing, it's something I've seen my whole life, though in a different context. My father operated in waters, frequently patrolled by vessels hunting for illegal fishing. He taught me that the best way to avoid unwanted attention wasn't to hide or run, but to be so authentically what you claimed to be that questioning it would seem absurd. Maya nodded, hearing echoes of her grandmother's philosophy from an unexpected source. That's precisely the insight that makes you valuable to this program, Ensign. Sometimes the most effective security concepts don't originate in intelligence academies, but in the practical wisdom of people who navigate dangerous waters for their livelihood. Reyes straightened slightly, her expression showing new confidence. I'd like to contribute that perspective to the program, if it's valuable. It's essential, Maya assured her. In fact, I'm assigning you to the Pacific Trader for your initial training rotation. I think you'll find it particularly enlightening. As the recruits departed for their next training module, Captain Brennan remained behind with Maya. Reyes shows promise, he noted. She reminds me a bit of your grandmother, that same quiet intensity, the ability to observe without appearing. To observe. I noticed that too, Maya agreed. She understands instinctively what the others will need months to learn, that authenticity can't be fabricated. It has to be lived. Brennan checked his watch. Speaking of authenticity, your meeting with the Deputy Secretary of Defense is in 30 minutes. Are you prepared? Maya's expression tightened slightly. As prepared as I can be for a bureaucrat who thinks operational security is best achieved through paperwork rather than practical expertise. Deputy Secretary Morrison is a politician. Not an operator, Brennan reminded her. But he controls funding allocations that could determine the future of the Phantom program. Try to remember that when he starts talking about oversight committees and accountability frameworks. I'll be diplomatic, Maya promised with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Or at least I'll try to be. The Pentagon Conference room where Deputy Secretary Morrison awaited embodied everything Maya found frustrating about bureaucracy: sleek, sterile, and removed from the realities of field operations. Morrison himself, a tall man with the polished appearance of someone who had never gotten his hands dirty in operational work, rose as she entered. Miss Sullivan, he greeted, extending his hand. Thank you for making the trip to Washington. I understand you've been quite busy with your fishing expeditions. The slight pause before the final words carried his skepticism clearly. Deputy Secretary, Maya replied, shaking his hand firmly. I appreciate you taking time from your schedule to discuss the Phantom program's achievements. Achievements, Morrison repeated, gesturing for her to take a seat across from him. That's precisely what I'd like to discuss. The program has Now been operational for 14 months under your leadership. It has consumed considerable resources. The question my office must ask is, what tangible return has the Defense Department received on this investment? Maya had anticipated this approach. Morrison was known for his focus on quantifiable metrics and documented outcomes, a perspective that often failed to capture the true value of covert operations. Deputy Secretary, in the past 14 months, Phantom vessels have conducted 28 successful missions across 4 operational categories. She began opening the secure folder she had brought: intelligence gathering in contested waters, personnel extraction from compromised positions, equipment deployment in monitored regions, and environmental research support in disputed territories. She handed him a classified summary document. These operations have resulted in the acquisition of critical intelligence on unauthorized maritime activities, the safe extraction of 17 intelligence personnel and researchers from potentially hostile situations, and the deployment of monitoring equipment that has transformed our understanding of foreign naval operations in protected waters. Morrison scanned the document with the practiced efficiency of a career bureaucrat, his expression revealing nothing. Impressive statistics, he acknowledged finally. But my concern isn't with the quantity of operations, but with their necessity. The Defense Department has conventional assets capable of many of these functions. What specific value does the Phantom program provide that justifies its separate operational structure and budget allocation? Maya leaned forward slightly. Deputy Secretary, conventional assets are increasingly monitored, tracked, and anticipated by foreign intelligence. The moment a naval vessel or recognized Coast Guard cutter appears in sensitive waters, its purpose is immediately questioned and its activities constrained. She reached for the tablet on the conference table, activating a secure presentation. This is satellite imagery from Operation Silverfish last month. A conventional extraction attempt was planned using standard naval assets. Within 2 hours of the vessel's departure, foreign surveillance had identified it, categorized it, and established monitoring patterns that made its intended mission impossible. She advanced to the next image. This is the Phantom vessel, Northern Light, approaching the same extraction point 12 hours later. It was visually observed by 3 different foreign vessels, including direct contact with 1 patrol boat. None recognized it as anything other than the commercial research vessel it appeared to be. Morrison studied the images with greater attention. And the extraction was successful, completely. 4 climate scientists with critical data on unauthorized seabed activities were removed without incident. Their research has since been integrated into 3 different intelligence assessments of foreign maritime operations. The Deputy Secretary sat back, his expression thoughtful. Ms. Sullivan, I appreciate the operational successes, but my concern extends to matters of accountability and oversight. Your program operates with exceptional autonomy. Its command structure, while technically within Coast Guard and naval jurisdiction, exists in a gray area that makes traditional oversight challenging. Maya had expected this objection as well. The tension between operational effectiveness and bureaucratic oversight was as old as intelligence work itself. The program's unique structure is precisely what makes it effective, she countered. Phantom vessels succeed because they operate according to maritime realities rather than administrative convenience. Each mission is fully documented and reviewed after completion. Attempting to impose conventional command structures would compromise the very advantage that makes Phantom valuable. Morrison's expression hardened slightly. That perspective might be operationally convenient, Ms. Sullivan, but it doesn't address the fundamental requirements of governmental accountability. The program cannot continue to expand without more formalized oversight protocols. Maya recognized the implied threat. Morrison couldn't shut down the program at successes were too valuable, but he could restrict its growth and constrain its operational flexibility. She considered her grandmother's approach to similar bureaucratic challenges. Elizabeth Sullivan had often noted that when confronting institutional resistance, the most effective strategy was to offer a concession that appeared significant while preserving the essential operational freedom. "Deputy Secretary, I understand your concerns," she said after a moment. "I propose the establishment of a quarterly review committee composed of representatives from Naval Intelligence, Coast Guard Command, and your office. This committee would receive comprehensive operational summaries and performance metrics, with the authority to request specific mission details when necessary for security assessment." She paused, then added the crucial qualifier, "with the understanding that real-time operational control remains with Phantom Command to ensure mission security and effectiveness." Morrison studied her, clearly recognizing the careful balance. She was proposing quarterly is insufficient. Monthly reviews would be the minimum acceptable frequency. "Bi-monthly," Maya countered, "with emergency review capacity for high-sensitivity operations." A slight smile crossed Morrison's face, the expression of a negotiator who recognized a worthy opponent. Bi-monthly reviews with the committee, having authority to recommend, not just request operational adjustments, where security protocols appear insufficient. Recommend, yes. With Phantom Command retaining final operational authority subject to Admiral Pierce's oversight, Maya specified, ensuring that critical decision-making remained with those who understood the practical realities of field operations. Morrison considered this for a long moment, then nodded. "Acceptable, provided Admiral Pierce signs off on each operational plan personally. I'll draft the oversight framework for review by all parties." As they concluded the meeting with the formal diplomatic language of bureaucratic compromise, Maya reflected that her grandmother would have approached the situation, similarly yielding on administrative procedure to protect operational integrity. When she exited the Pentagon and Panan an hour later, Admiral Pierce was waiting beside the car that would return her to the airfield. "How did it go with Morrison?" he asked as they pulled away from the imposing building. "As expected," Maya replied. "He wanted control. I offered visibility. We compromised on a bi-monthly review structure that gives his office the appearance of oversight without compromising operational security." Pierce nodded approvingly. "Well negotiated. Morrison's not unreasonable. He just needs to protect his position with the oversight committees. This gives him what he needs without sacrificing what we need. My grandmother used to say that bureaucracy is like current. You can't fight it directly, but you can navigate through it if you understand its patterns." "Speaking of navigation," Pierce said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "we've received intelligence about a developing situation in the South China Sea. Environmental researchers documenting coral reef degradation have encountered something unexpected evidence of unauthorized underwater structures that appear to be monitoring stations disguised as natural formations." Maya's interest sharpened immediately. "What's their status?" "Still in place, continuing their legitimate research. But they've reported increased patrol activity around their vessel. We're concerned they may be under surveillance." "Do we have a Phantom asset in the region?" Pierce nodded. "The Southern Star is operating approximately 300 nautical miles from their position, conducting actual marine biology research as its cover. Captain Lin is experienced. He completed the first Phantom training rotation and has conducted 3 successful missions. But this would be an extraction in significantly more contested waters than he's previously navigated," Maya noted. "Considerably more complex," Pierce agreed. "Which is why I'd like you to take operational command." Not on site, the Pacific trader's sudden appearance would raise questions, but as mission coordinator from our regional command center in Guam, Maya considered the implications. This would be the first major test of the Phantom program's ability to function beyond her direct field involvement, a necessary evolution if the program was to achieve its full potential. Who would you assign as tactical advisor to Captain Lin? I was thinking Ensign Reyes, Pierce replied. Her performance in training has been exceptional, and her background gives her particular insight into the fishing vessel operations that would provide the best cover in that region. Maya smiled slightly. I had the same thought. She has the right instincts for this kind of work. Then you'll take command of the operation. Yes, Maya decided. But I want to bring my grandfather into the command structure as well. His experience with traditional fishing operations in complex environments would be valuable for building authentic cover activities. Pierce raised an eyebrow. Robert Sullivan hasn't been operationally involved in maritime activities for years. Maya watched the tracking system as the Southern Star navigated through a particularly complex patrol pattern without drawing attention. I think what would make her proudest is that we're doing it differently, she replied. Not just the operational techniques, but the human foundation. She carried her burden alone. We're sharing it, creating a community of people who understand the work and support each other through it. Robert reached over and squeezed her hand gently. That's the real legacy she left you, Maya. Not the boat, not the missions, but the courage to find your own way of doing what needs to be done. As the operation concluded successfully, with the Southern Star safely beyond the patrol perimeter and the researchers' critical data secured, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a woman mocked for her rust bucket fishing boat to the architect of a program that was transforming maritime intelligence operations. The Pacific Trader waited in its home port, ready for whatever mission might come next. Its hidden torpedo tubes and disguised capabilities remained symbolic of the program's fundamental principle, that appearances could be deceiving, that ordinary vessels could accomplish extraordinary things, and that sometimes the most powerful force in contested waters wasn't strength or speed, but the ability to hide in plain sight. Maya Sullivan had inherited more than just a boat with a remarkable history. She had inherited a tradition of quiet courage, of intelligence applied to impossible problems, of finding paths where none seemed to exist. And she had transformed that inheritance into something uniquely her own, a legacy that would continue saving lives and preserving knowledge in waters where danger and opportunity flowed together like currents in an ever-changing sea. The Coast Guard officers who had once mocked her vessel now trained under her guidance, learning that true operational security came not from imposing technology, but from understanding the human elements that made deception effective, the intelligence. Analysts who had doubted a civilian's capabilities now structured their collection. Requirements around the unique access Phantom vessels provided to contested environments. And Maya Sullivan, granddaughter of a legend and architect of a new approach to maritime operations, continued to navigate the complex waters between historical legacy and future innovation, between institutional constraints and operational necessity, between appearing ordinary and accomplishing the extraordinary. Just as the Pacific Trader sailed the thin line between what was seen and what was real, just as the Phantom Fleet moved invisibly through the world's most dangerous waters, just as courage sometimes wore the disguise of everyday life, hiding its true nature until the moment when it was needed most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.